Dad, don't come to Thanksgiving. It's just us this year. I read the text twice, waiting for it to turn into a joke. It didn't. And when my son-in-law followed it with one icy line that made my hands shake, I did the only thing I'd ever had the courage to do. I stopped paying for their life. Welcome back to the channel. Before we get into it, tell me this. From which city and country are you watching? Drop it in the comments because I really do read them. And if you're into real, live-through stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the kind of justice that doesn't need screaming to land like a hammer, hit like, subscribe, and turn notification bell, because what happened after I cut them off turned my entire world upside down. Now let me take you back to the moment my phone buzzed, and my own family made me feel like a stranger in my daughter's life. The message came in on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of late November cold that turns everything outside my kitchen window into washed-out watercolor. Burlington, Vermont always looks like it's holding its breath right before Thanksgiving. Wood smoke. In the air, bare branches scraping the sky, neighbors dragging in firewood like they're preparing for a siege. I was making coffee, still in my socks, when my phone vibrated against the counter. Kendra, Dad, Thanksgiving will be just immediate family this year. Please don't come. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misread it. I'm 59. My eyes aren't what they used to be before the years and stress and spreadsheets. So I leaned closer like a man trying to bargain with reality. Immediate family. I was her father. I set the mug down slowly. Not because it was hot, because my hand had started shaking. Before I could even decide whether to call her, another message popped up, not from Kendra. From Miles, my daughter's husband. Miles, it's time we stop pretending you've earned a seat at our table just because you pay for things. That line hit me like a slap in a quiet room. Not loud, not dramatic. Just humiliating, because it didn't need volume to cut. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled behind me, and suddenly the sound felt insulting. Like even the appliances were moving on while I stood there trying to understand how a man who married into my family could talk to me like I was a contractor who hadn't met performance metrics. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. And the worst part wasn't being uninvited. The worst part was how quickly my mind jumped to the reason. Because I already knew the truth I'd been avoiding for years. I was dad to them when they said my name. I was the payment system. 8 years earlier, my wife, Elaine, died on a Tuesday in April. We'd been married 32 years. The kind of marriage that doesn't look romantic on Instagram, but holds up in real life. School. Plays, late bills, cold dinners, hard apologies. She got sick fast. I worked too much. I always thought there'd be more time to make it up to her. There was. After she died, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my compass. And in that fog, I started trying to fix grief with the one thing I understood. Money, help. Support, making life easier for my daughter so she wouldn't feel the ache I felt. Which is how I ended up, years later, standing in my kitchen in Burlington reading a message that told me I didn't belong at my own family's Thanksgiving. I looked at the coffee untouched. Then I looked at my phone again. And I realized something that made my stomach go cold. If they truly believed I hadn't earned a place, then what did they think they'd earned from me? If you'd asked me 5 years ago whether my daughter loved me, I would have said yes without hesitation. Kendra was my only child. Smart, stubborn, the kind of kid who argued like a lawyer at 12, and then apologized with a hug. At 13, when she was little, she'd crawl into my lap with a book and demand I do the voices. When she got her driver's license, she cried because she was terrified of being independent. After Elaine died, Kendra moved back home for a while, just until she got her footing. That while turned into 14 months. Then she met Miles. Miles was polished, confident. Always looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog. Perfect hair, clean boots, that casual grin that somehow implied he understood life better than you did. He worked in marketing, which sounded normal until you realized it meant he bounced between jobs. Always leaving right when people started asking questions, but he talked well. He made promises in a soothing voice. When he proposed, he did it on the Burlington waterfront in December, snow falling like a movie. Scene. Kendra called me crying, breathless, showing the ring on FaceTime like I could feel it sparkle. Through the screen, I wanted her to be happy so badly it made me reckless. They got married the next summer, a small ceremony at a lakeside inn. Elaine's sister cried during the vows. I stood there in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore, trying to smile through the ache of Elaine. Not being there. After the reception, Miles clapped me on the shoulder and said, "We're going to build something." Real. I believed him. 6 months later, Kendra called, voice tight. They wanted to buy a house, rates were rising. They were so close, but their down payment was short. I had the money. I wired it. Then the furnace went out, then their car needed repairs. Then Kendra was pregnant, and they wanted a safer vehicle. Every request arrived wrapped in logic, and I'm a financial analyst by trade. Logic is my native language. I sat in conference rooms my whole life watching people justify decisions they already wanted to make. I told myself I was helping. I told myself I was protecting my family. And quietly, without ever having a dramatic conversation about it, my support turned into a system. I didn't just hand them a check sometimes. I became the hidden foundation holding their lifestyle up. By the time my phone buzzed with that Thanksgiving message, I was covering their property taxes through my escrow account because the house was still technically in my name. The temporary arrangement we'd never finish changing. Their childcare payments for my grandson, Owen, now 7, and my granddaughter, Leela, 5. Miles's business expenses, software subscriptions, conference tickets, a phone plan he said was client-facing, a credit card I'd opened for emergencies that somehow became their daily spending card. And the biggest one, I was the guarantor on a small home equity line that they'd used to renovate. The kitchen, renovations I never asked for, in a house I technically owned. I didn't even remember agreeing to some of it. That's how autopilot works. You set it up once, and then you stop seeing it. It becomes background noise, like a refrigerator hum. Until one day the power cuts out, and you realize how loud it was. After the text, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The same laptop where I reviewed retirement plans for clients who trusted me to see what they couldn't. I logged into my banking dashboard and started pulling up linked accounts. There it was. A neat list of transfers and payments, all labeled in that calm, sterile language banks use that. Makes everything sound reasonable. Childcare, Bright Steps Learning. Property tax, Chittenden County. Visa payment, Harlow Family. Home equity, monthly interest. Mobile Unlimited Plus plan. I did the math. Not by estimates, not by feelings. Real numbers. It was $6,940 a month. Every month. And I live alone. My mortgage is paid off. My groceries are basic. My biggest indulgence is a good bottle of wine on Fridays and a diner breakfast on Sundays. I'd been living like a man who couldn't afford his own kindness, while funding theirs like it was mandatory. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. I tried to hear Elaine's voice, because in moments like that, I always did. She used to say, "Graham, you can be generous without becoming a doormat." I'd smiled at that back then. Now it sounded like prophecy. My phone lit up again. A notification, Kendra typing. My chest tightened, because no matter what money had turned me into, she was still my daughter. Part of me wanted her to say it was a misunderstanding, a bad joke, Miles overstepping. But what came through wasn't an apology. It was a final, clean instruction. Kendra, please respect our boundaries. I read it 3 times. Boundaries. The word people love to use when they want control without accountability. I stared at my screen and finally admitted the truth I'd been dodging. If their boundary was excluding me from the holiday, then mine needed to be something they could feel, and I already knew exactly where to draw it. I didn't call, I didn't argue. I didn't send a paragraph explaining my feelings like a man begging to be understood. I opened a blank note on my phone and wrote 2 sentences. You don't get to cut me out and keep the benefits of my presence. Love without respect is just extraction. Then I deleted the note because I didn't need to explain it to myself. I needed to act. I started with the simplest lever, the credit card. I logged into the account and pulled up authorized users. There they were, Miles and Kendra, each with their own shiny card linked to my credit. I hovered over Remove User. For a second, my mind flashed with memories like a defense attorney trying to stop me. Kendra at 14, crying because kids at school were cruel. Kendra at 22, showing me her first apartment. Kendra holding baby Owen, exhausted but glowing. Then another image rose up, sharper than the others. Miles texting me that I hadn't earned a seat. My finger clicked. Authorized users removed. New cards will be issued. Next, childcare. Bright Steps had an online portal. I remembered setting it up after Owen was born, when Kendra went back to work and they just needed a little help. I logged in, found my saved payment method, and removed it. A warning popped up. Payment required within 48 hours to avoid suspension. I stared at the warning, my throat tightened. Kids shouldn't be punished for adults' behavior. But I also knew the ugly truth. The kids were already being used, always had been. They were the emotional armor Kendra and Miles wore when they asked for money. I removed the payment anyway, because I wasn't punishing children. I was refusing to be blackmailed by my love for them. Then I canceled the monthly transfer I'd been sending to Kendra's account labeled House Help. It wasn't house help, it was their lifestyle cushion. The money that made it possible for Miles to chase opportunities without consequences. Last came the home equity line. This one took longer because it was tied to the property, my property. I pulled up the documents. The line of credit was in my name as primary holder. But when I scrolled down, I saw something that made my stomach twist. There was a digital signature added 3 months after the account opened. A secondary signature authorizing a credit increase. It wasn't mine. I know my signature the way you know your own laugh. Mine slants hard to the right, a habit from writing quickly in meetings. This signature looked careful, rounded, like someone trying to imitate a man they didn't understand. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. My hands went cold. I wasn't just being excluded from Thanksgiving. I was being treated like a resource that could be altered. Used. Possibly forged. I took screenshots, saved them in a folder labeled Kendra Documents. Then finally, I opened the family group chat. Not the one from Thanksgiving. Kendra had stopped using it months ago. She preferred direct messages. Cleaner, fewer witnesses. I started a new group with just Kendra and Miles. And I typed slowly, carefully, like a man writing something that would be read in court one day. Me understood. I'll respect your immediate family boundary. Starting today, I'm removing my financial support from your household. Credit access is revoked, transfers are stopped, and payments tied to my accounts will no longer be covered by me. I wish you a peaceful holiday. I stared at it. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't insulting. Just factual. I hit send. The message delivered. Read receipts appeared almost immediately. And then nothing. For exactly 7 minutes, there was no reply. No anger, no pleading. Just silence. Then my phone started vibrating like it was possessed. Kendra calling. Miles calling. Unknown number calling. Kendra again. I watched it like you watch a storm roll in from across a lake. You can't stop it. You can only decide where you're going to stand. I turned my phone on silent. I sat at my table in the quiet kitchen, listening to the heater kick on and off, watching the gray daylight fade. At exactly 4:12 p.m., my phone showed 27 missed calls. At 4:37 p.m., it was 54. At 5:05 p.m., it was 86. I didn't answer a single one, because the moment I answered, I'd be back where I started, negotiating my dignity like it was optional. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water, opened my laptop, and started documenting everything. Call logs, texts, times. Then came the first text from Miles. Miles, you're seriously doing this right now. You're ruining the kids' holiday. I stared at it. Not Dad, what happened? Not Graham, can we talk? Not even Kendra's upset. Straight to guilt, straight to blame, straight to the children. I typed one sentence back. Me, this is not about the holiday, this is about respect. Then I stopped responding. And as I sat there with my silent phone and my open laptop, I realized something that chilled me. More than the Vermont winter. If they were panicking this hard after 1 hour, what exactly had they built their life on? If you've ever had someone treat your love like a utility bill, stay with me, because what I discovered next made that Thanksgiving text look like the smallest part of the betrayal. The next morning, Burlington was bright with that sharp, brittle cold that makes the sky look too blue to be real. Snow dusted the sidewalks like someone had sprinkled flour. I went to work anyway, because routine is how you keep your mind from spiraling. My office is downtown, second floor of an old brick building that smells faintly like paper and old. Coffee, I've been there 17 years, same desk, same window view of Church Street. Same quiet satisfaction of making numbers behave. At 10:18 a.m., the receptionist buzzed my line. Graham, she said, voice cautious, there's someone here to see you. I already knew. I pulled up the lobby camera feed on my monitor. Miles stood there in a fitted coat like he was auditioning for a commercial. Kendra was beside him, arms crossed, eyes red. Between them, Owen and Leela shifted uneasily, kids dressed too nicely for a weekday like props. My heart clenched so hard it felt like a physical cramp. I wanted to run down there, scoop them up, ask them if they were okay, if they were scared. But then I saw Miles lean down and whisper something to Kendra. Her face changed. Not softer, harder. And that's when I understood. The kids weren't there by accident. They were there as leverage. I picked up the phone and said to the receptionist, please tell them I'm unavailable. A pause. They're insisting. I watched Miles start gesturing, animated, the way salesmen do when they're trying to overwhelm someone into saying yes. I kept my voice calm. If they won't leave, call building security. The receptionist didn't argue. She just said, okay. I stayed on the camera feed. A security guard approached. Miles' posture shifted instantly. Smile for the guard, respectful nod. The performance of being the reasonable one. Kendra wiped her eyes dramatically. Owen looked up at the guard like he was confused. Why adults were making things weird. The guard spoke, pointed toward the door. Miles' jaw tightened. He tried again, hands open, pleading, look, the innocent father act. The guard didn't budge. Finally, Kendra grabbed Leela's hand and turned away. Owen followed. Miles stayed a second longer, glaring up toward the second-floor hallway like he could see me. Through brick. Then he mouthed something. I couldn't hear it through the camera, but I could read lips well enough. You'll regret this. They left. I stared at the empty lobby after they disappeared. The camera showed strangers walking in, normal life resuming like nothing happened. But my chest was still tight, because I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I just watched my daughter become someone I didn't recognize. By lunchtime, my phone had dozens of new texts, most from Kendra, long paragraphs, then short ones. Then angry ones. One stood out because it wasn't emotional, it was practical. Kendra, the property taxes are due next month. What am I supposed to do? I read it slowly. Noda, Dad, why are you hurt? Noda, can we talk about what happened? Noda, I miss you. Property taxes. That's what she led with. I didn't respond. That evening, I sat at home with a legal pad on my table like I was preparing for a client meeting. Because that's what this was now. A situation requiring strategy. I wrote 3 headings. What I own, what they can access, what they can claim. Under what I own, I wrote, the house deed still in my name, the home equity line in my name, the credit account in my name. Under what they can access, I wrote, the house physically, my grandson and granddaughter emotionally, public opinion socially. And under what they can claim, I wrote, we live here. We rely on him. He's being cruel. Then I stared at the page until the truth settled in. This wasn't going to end with a heartfelt apology, because they didn't see me as a person who could be hurt. They saw me as a system that had malfunctioned. And systems don't get sympathy. They get pressure until they resume output. I capped my pen, opened my laptop, and searched for attorneys. Not family friends. Not someone connected to church. Someone neutral. Because if this turned into a fight, I wanted it clean. And while I searched, I kept thinking about that strange signature on the credit increase. If they were willing to imitate my name on paper, what else had they done behind my back? 2 days later, I sat in a quiet office on Battery Street across from a man named Elliot Crane, property and financial disputes attorney who looked like he'd never wasted a word in his life. His office smelled like lemon cleaner and printer toner. A small fountain bubbled in the corner, trying too hard to make legal conflict feel peaceful. Elliot flipped through my documents with the calm focus of someone who'd seen families tear each other apart over less. He tapped the home equity paperwork with his pen. Mr. Harlow, he said, you said you did not authorize this limit increase. I didn't, I replied. And you did not sign this, he pointed to the signature. No. Elliot nodded once, like a doctor confirming a diagnosis. Then you have 2 problems, he said. One is the occupancy issue. The second is potentially criminal. My mouth went dry. Criminal how? He slid a different page toward me, one I hadn't noticed in my own packet. It was a form from the bank authorizing an increase on the line of credit. There was a checkbox marked Power of Attorney on file. I blinked. That's not right. Elliot's eyes stayed steady. Do you have a power of attorney arrangement with your daughter or her husband? No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. Elliot leaned back. Then someone filed something. I felt like the room tilted slightly. Elaine and I had talked about power of attorney when she got sick. Who would handle what if? Something happened, but after she died, I never completed new paperwork. I didn't need to. I was healthy, capable, working. Or so I thought. Elliot asked, have you ever signed a document and left blanks? No, I said, I'm careful. Have you ever given them access to your files, to home office, your laptop? My throat tightened. Kendra used to come over with the kids all the time. She'd rummage through my desk looking for crayons. Owen once spilled juice on a folder. I laughed and told him not to worry. Suddenly, that memory didn't feel cute. It felt careless. Elliot continued, if a fraudulent power of attorney was filed, we can request records. The bank will have copies, but you need to decide what you want. What I want, I said, voice low, is my life back. Elliot nodded. Then we proceed in 2 lanes. He outlined it like a blueprint. First, a formal notice that they must vacate the home within a set period, because there is no lease. And the owner is revoking permission. Second, a request for banking records related to that power of attorney claim. Third, if fraud is confirmed, we file a report and you protect yourself legally, because if they can forge your authority once, they can do it again. I stared at the papers until the ink blurred. Kendra was my daughter. Miles was family by marriage. And yet here I was hearing words like fraud and criminal, like I was discussing strangers. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, a bank error, a clerical mistake. But deep down, I already knew what Elliot was going to find. Because Miles didn't just feel entitled. He felt justified. And people who feel justified don't stop at polite requests. They cross lines and call it necessary. Elliot slid a retainer agreement toward me. I signed it with a hand that was steady only because my shock had turned into something harder. Resolve. On my way out, I sat in my car for 5 minutes staring at the steering wheel, breathing like I'd just run up a hill. I remembered the way Elaine used to look at Kendra, soft, proud, protective. If Elaine were alive, she'd be devastated. And that thought made me angry because I realized something bitter. They were using Elaine's memory as a shield. They expected me to cave because I didn't want to lose my family. But I'd already lost my wife. I'd already survived the worst kind of loneliness, which meant I wasn't as controllable as they thought. That night, my phone started buzzing with new kinds of notifications. No calls, no texts, messages from coworkers, from neighbors, from a guy at my gym I barely spoke to. Graham, are you okay? Is this true? Man, I didn't know you had it in you. My stomach dropped. I opened Facebook, an app I hardly used, and typed Kendra's name. Her profile picture was a perfect family photo. Kendra smiling, Miles with his arm around her Owen, and Leela clean and bright like a holiday card. At the top of her page was a fresh post. Some people think money makes them family. My father is trying to put us out right before the holidays. Please keep our kids in your prayers. There were dozens of comments. Sympathy, anger, people who didn't know the story calling me a monster. And right then, staring at that public performance, I understood. They weren't just trying to pressure me privately. They were going to destroy my reputation to force my hand. If you think this is where I snapped and posted receipts, stay with me, because what I did next was quieter and it hit harder. I didn't respond publicly. Not because I couldn't. I had the screenshots, the bank records, the call logs, the timeline. I could have made one post and torched their narrative in 5 minutes. But I've spent my career watching what happens when people fight in public. Nobody listens. Everyone chooses a side based on emotion. The loudest story wins, not the truest one. So instead of screaming into the internet, I built a file. A clean, chronological file. Because if this was going to end, it wasn't going to end with drama. It was going to end with reality. Elliot Crane's assistant emailed me the next morning with a draft notice, revocation of permission to occupy, 30 days to vacate, delivery by certified mail and process server. I read it twice, then approved it. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the house. It was in South Burlington, in a newer neighborhood with manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. The kind of place people buy when they want to look stable. I parked across the street and just sat there. The lights were on inside, a TV flickered. Through the window I saw movement, Miles walking past, talking animatedly on the phone. My house, my property. But it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a set they were using. A stage. I didn't go inside, I didn't confront them. I just sat and observed like a man doing an inspection. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. A security camera above the garage, angled. Outward, not inward. Not to protect the home. To watch the street. To watch for me. I drove away. That evening, Elliot called me. We requested the bank records, he said. They confirmed a power of attorney document was uploaded to your profile in early September. I gripped my phone. Uploaded by who? They won't say yet without a formal subpoena, he said. But the document exists. I closed my eyes, my voice came out rough. Is it legitimate? Elliot paused. The signature doesn't match the one on your driver's license records. My breath caught. There it was. Not suspicion. Confirmation. They had filed something in my name that wasn't mine. Elliot continued, we'll get the copy. If it's forged, you can file a report. But I want you prepared. Once you do that, your relationship with your daughter may not recover. I stared at the dark kitchen window, my reflection looking older than it should. I'm not the one who broke it, I said quietly. Elliot didn't argue. I'll call you when we have the document. After the call, I did something simple but important. I changed every password. Banking, email, cloud storage, credit monitoring. Then I put a freeze on my credit. Not because I wanted to punish them. Because I finally understood I was dealing with people who saw my identity as a tool. On Thursday, the notice was delivered. I didn't watch it happen. Elliot's office handled it. But my phone lit up at 10:46 a.m. with a single text from Kendra. Kendra, how could you do this to your own grandchildren? I stared at it until the letters stopped looking like words and started looking like a tactic. Not how could you do this to me? Straight to the kids. Always the kids. I didn't respond. That night I barely slept, not because I doubted my choice. Because grief is strange. You can be right and still feel like you're losing something. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A message. A photo. Owen and Leela sitting on a couch, both looking tired, eyes a little too shiny like they'd been told to look sad. Caption, they keep asking why Grandpa hates them. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. This time it worked because it wasn't just anger. It was pain. I stared at the photo, and for a second I wanted to call, to fix it. To rescue them from whatever story they were being fed. Then I remembered the security camera above the garage. The forged power of attorney. The public smear post. And I realized, if I gave them 1 inch, they'd take it as proof they could still control me. I locked the phone screen, set it face down, and whispered into the dark. I love you, Owen. I love you, Leela, but I'm not walking back into a trap. And as I laid there listening to the quiet of my apartment, I knew the next move had to be bigger than eviction. Because if they'd forged my authority once, what else had they been doing while I was busy trying to be a good dad? Elliot called on Monday. We obtained the copy, he said. My stomach tightened, and... It's bad, he replied, blunt. The document names your daughter as agent, but the witness signature is questionable. And the notary stamp appears to be from an out-of-state notary who has multiple complaints. I felt my pulse in my ears, so it's fake. Yes, he said. And it was used to authorize the credit increase. I stared at my calendar like the squares could make sense of betrayal. What do we do? I asked. Elliot's voice stayed calm. If you want full protection, we file a police report. Fraud and identity misuse. I'll provide documentation. I swallowed hard. A police report against your own child feels like swallowing glass. Even when you know the child didn't start the fire, but they handed someone the matches. I don't want Kendra arrested, I said. That's not how it works, Elliot replied gently. You report what happened. The investigation determines responsibility. And that's when I finally said the hardest thing out loud. Miles did this. Elliot didn't challenge it. He just said, that's possible. That afternoon, I walked into the Burlington Police Department with a folder in my hands, and the kind of numb calm that comes when your emotions have burned out. The officer at the desk was polite, middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipped professionalism. Can I help you? She asked. I need to report possible financial fraud and identity misuse, I said. The words felt unreal in my mouth. I handed over the documents, the forged POA, the bank record showing the upload date, the credit increase request, my driver's license signature comparison. The officer's face shifted slightly, less casual, more serious. She asked questions, I answered. Then she said something that made my chest ache. You're doing the right thing, protecting yourself. Protecting myself. That's what this was, wasn't it? Not revenge. Not punishment. Protection from people who'd proven they were willing to hurt me. When I got back to work, my phone had 5 voicemails from Kendra. I didn't listen. Elliot told me not to engage once the report was filed. 2 hours later, Miles showed up again. Not at my office this time. At my apartment. My doorbell camera buzzed. I opened the feed and saw him standing there alone. No kids, no Kendra, no performance. His face looked different when there wasn't an audience. Harder, meaner. He leaned toward the camera like he knew I was watching. "You think you're smart, old man?" he said, voice low. "You think you can just flip a switch and ruin us?" I didn't move, I didn't speak. I just recorded. Miles continued, "You're going to make your daughter hate you. You're going to die alone, and when you do, you won't see those kids again, you hear me?" He stepped back, spit the last line like poison. Then he smiled. "Open the door, Graham. Let's talk like men." I watched him stand there, waiting. And for one dangerous second, part of me wanted to open it. Not to negotiate. To punch him. To defend my family's honor. To reclaim power in the oldest, dumbest way. But I didn't. Because real power isn't losing control. Real power is staying still, while someone reveals who they are. I hit one button and called building security. 2 guards arrived within minutes. Miles' posture changed the moment they stepped off the elevator. Hands up, friendly smile. Misunderstanding, polite nods. But his eyes flicked once toward my door. And I saw it, the fury behind the mask. The guards escorted him out. That evening, Kendra's Facebook post changed. It wasn't a plea anymore. It was a warning. If anything happens to my family because of my father's actions, everyone will know who's responsible. That line wasn't grief. It was intimidation. And I finally understood. Kendra wasn't just being manipulated anymore. She was participating. If you've ever watched someone you love turn into someone who uses threats like tools, keep listening, because the next twist didn't come from me. It came from the one person Miles never thought would look at the numbers. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something in me, maybe instinct, maybe exhaustion, made me answer. "Mr. Harlow," a man asked. His voice was older, measured. "This is Calvin Reed. I'm Elaine's father." My throat tightened immediately. "Calvin, my father-in-law." Elaine's dad had moved to New Hampshire years ago. We weren't estranged exactly, just separate lives. Holidays sometimes, a call on birthdays. The slow drift of grief and distance. "Calvin," I said, surprised, "is everything okay?" A pause, then he exhaled. "I saw what Kendra posted," he said, "and I called her. She told me you lost your mind, that you're punishing them." I stared at my living room wall. "Did you believe her?" "I didn't know what to believe," Calvin admitted. So I asked Miles for details, and he started talking fast, too fast, like a man selling something. I felt a strange surge of gratitude, sharp as cold air. Calvin continued, "Elaine used to say you were steady, Graham, and I know my granddaughter. She can be stubborn, but she's not cruel, unless someone feeds it." My chest ached. "Calvin, they forged documents." Silence. Then softly, "What?" I told him everything. Not emotional, not dramatic, just facts. Thanksgiving exclusion, the messages. The financial support, the forged power of attorney, the police report. Calvin didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he said something that landed like a stone. "I'm coming to Burlington." 2 days later, Calvin sat across from me at a quiet diner, his coffee untouched. He looked older than the last time I saw him, thinner, eyes sharper with sadness. "I met with Kendra yesterday," he said, "at the house." My pulse spiked, and Calvin shook his head slowly. Miles did most of the talking. Kendra kept looking at the floor. The kids were upstairs. He leaned forward, then I asked to see the paperwork. I swallowed. "What happened?" Calvin's jaw tightened. Miles said it was none of my business. "Of course he did," I murmured. Calvin's eyes hardened. So I told him something Elaine would have said. "If you're doing the right thing, you don't hide." "The proof." He took a breath. Miles got angry. "He said you were a bitter old man trying to control them. And then, Graham," he slipped. My hands clenched around my cup. "Slipped how?" Calvin's voice lowered. He said he won't have anything to control once we get the house refinanced anyway. The diner seemed to go quiet around me. Refinanced? The house that was still in my name. The house they were being ordered to vacate. Calvin continued. Kendra snapped her head up when he said that. Like she didn't know he'd said it out loud, and then I saw it, the fear. I stared at the table, nausea rolling. They were planning to keep it, I whispered. Or trap me into losing it. Calvin nodded grimly. That's what it sounded like. A week later, the eviction deadline approached. A moving truck appeared in the driveway, because when legal reality hits, performance stops working. I watched security camera footage Elliot had advised me to install legally, on my own. Property, boxes carried out, furniture loaded, Miles moving fast, angry, Kendra quieter, tense. On the last day, Calvin called again. They're leaving, he said. Kendra brought the kids to my hotel earlier. She asked me to watch them while they pack. My heart twisted. How were the kids? Confused, Calvin paused. Owen asked me why Grandpa Graham was mad at them. I closed my eyes. What did you say? I said you loved them, Calvin replied. And that sometimes adults make choices that have consequences. He didn't fully understand. But he believed me. The next morning, I drove to the house after they were gone. The air inside smelled like lemon cleaner and emptiness. The rooms echoed with my footsteps. The walls had scuffs. The carpet had a stain near the living room, small damage. Evidence of a life lived without gratitude. But the biggest thing I felt wasn't anger. It was relief. Like finally setting down a weight you didn't realize you were carrying until your shoulders stopped aching. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Elliot. Bank confirmed attempted refinance inquiry was initiated last month. Blocked by your new security freeze. I stared at the screen. There it was. Proof that Calvin's slip wasn't just talk. They had tried. They were trying to convert my life into their asset. And now, with the house empty and the legal protections in place, the last question wasn't whether I'd want. The last question was whether I could ever look at my daughter the same way again. Winter deepened. Burlington turned into a postcard. Snowbanks, holiday lights, frozen lake wind cutting through. Scarves, people smiled more in December, or maybe they just pretended better. I didn't pretend. I lived quieter. I reworked my finances like I was cleaning out a house after a storm. Simple, deliberate, protective. No more open access. No more emergencies that became expectations. And slowly, something strange happened. My home felt like mine again. My time felt like mine again. My dignity, something I hadn't realized I'd been trading away in monthly installments, started coming back. In mid-January, Calvin invited me to coffee again. He looked tired but steadier. Kendra left Miles, he said softly. My chest tightened. What? She finally admitted he pushed her into the paperwork, Calvin said. She said it started as just a way to make things easier, and then he kept escalating. She was scared you'd cut her off if you found out. I stared at my cup. The coffee swirled like a dark truth. And the kids, I asked. With her, Calvin said. She moved into an apartment across town. She's working more hours, it's not pretty. I swallowed. Did she ask about me? Calvin hesitated. She asked if you'd ever forgive her. My throat tightened. Forgiveness is easy to say in movies. In real life, it has weight. It has memory. I don't know, I admitted. I'm not trying to punish her forever. I can't be used again. Calvin nodded slowly. Elaine would have been proud of you for protecting yourself. That sentence hit me harder than anything else he could have said. Because deep down, that's what I'd needed to hear. Not that I was right. That I wasn't betraying Elaine by choosing myself. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. Crayon on the envelope, stick figures, a shaky heart. Inside was a drawing, me, Owen, Leela, and a big son over a house. The handwriting was messy, unmistakably a child S. Grandpa, I miss you. Can we play the train game again? I stared at it for a long time. Not because it made me want a cave. Because it reminded me what the fight was actually about. Not money. Not pride. Not winning. It was about protecting the kind of love that doesn't come with transactions. I called Calvin. "Can I see the kids at your place?" I asked. Not at Kendra's, not as a reconciliation show. Just time, safe time. Calvin's voice softened. "Yes, I think that's the right way." The first time I saw Owen and Leela again, it wasn't dramatic. No speeches. No apologies staged for an audience. We sat on Calvin's living room floor with a board game and a bowl of popcorn. Owen looked at me like he wasn't sure whether I was real. Leela stayed behind Calvin's knee until I rolled a toy train across the carpet and made the old sound Elaine used to make, choo-choo, and her face cracked into a smile. We played, we laughed. We existed. And in that simple, ordinary hour, I felt justice in its truest form. Not revenge. Not humiliation. Just peace. Boundaries holding. Love is still possible. Respect restored. Kendra didn't come in the room. Calvin said she stayed in the car outside. Not because I demanded it, because she didn't know how to face me yet. Maybe someday she will. Maybe someday she won't. But the difference is this. I'm not buying that day anymore. I'm not renting access to my own family. I'm not paying to be tolerated. If there's one thing I learned, it's that love without respect isn't love. It's a bill. And I'm done paying it. So here's my question for you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have cut them off the moment they disrespected you, or would you have tried one last conversation? If this story hit you, if it made you think about boundaries, family, and what dignity really costs, tap like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And comment your city and country too. I want to know where you're listening from because these stories travel farther than we think. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't what you do to them. It's what you finally stop doing to yourself.